He had everything that most people only dream of. Mansions with marble floors that reflected the morning sun like golden mirrors. Cars with engines that roared like lions, waiting to be unleashed on private highways that seemed endless. Vacations in places where others could only afford to buy postcards. Clothes tailored in Italy. Wines aged longer than the lives of those who served them. To the world, he was the image of success. A man who had conquered life, who had wrestled with fate and forced it to kneel before him. But behind the polished doors of his empire, behind the smile he wore like a mask for the cameras, there was a silence. A silence so heavy that no luxury could drown it out. From the outside, A was a king. From the inside, he was a prisoner of emptiness. Because in the endless pursuit of giving everything to his children, every dollar, every comfort, every dream already carved in gold, he had forgotten the one thing money could never buy. Presence. He was always away, always working, always building for tomorrow, but never living in the now. His children grew up surrounded by nannies, tutors, private schools, chauffeurs. They had everything except him, and though he believed he was securing their future, what he was really building was a wall one brick at a time between himself and the very people he loved most. Years passed like shadows at sunset. Birthdays turned into brief phone calls. Family dinners became rare, always postponed until next time. He thought there would always be another chance, always another tomorrow to make it right. But tomorrow is a cruel lie when taken for granted. The children became adults, hardened by privilege, blinded by abundance. They learned to expect without gratitude, to demand without remembering who had paid the price for it all. And though he was proud when they succeeded, deep inside, he longed for something simpler than applause. Longed for their hugs. As decades rolled on, the man who once seemed unbreakable began to weaken. His body, once powerful, betrayed him. His hands, once steady enough to sign contracts worth millions, trembled. His voice, once commanding boardrooms, cracked when he spoke. At 80 years old, the man who had bought everything discovered he could not buy time. He could not bribe his way out of loneliness. The disease came silently, like an intruder in the night, and stripped him of his strength. And when he needed someone most, the house that once echoed with music, laughter, and guests turned into a museum of silence. The phone no longer rang. The doorbell stayed quiet. Days stretched into nights, and nights into days, with only the ticking of a clock as his companion. Surrounded by paintings worth millions, he realized not one could smile back at him. Surrounded by statues carved by masters, he realized not one could comfort him. Surrounded by gold, he realized not one coin could hold his hand. He gave his children everything: cars, houses, trust funds, opportunities. But in return, they gave him nothing, not even their time. He would sit by the giant window of his mansion, watching the sunset stain the sky in crimson and gold, and wonder where he had gone wrong. How could someone who gave so much end up with so little? How could a man who built empires die without a family picture taken in years? He thought back to moments when his children were small, when they laughed without restraint, when their eyes lit up just by seeing him. He remembered tiny hands tugging at his sleeve, asking him to play, to stay a little longer, to be there. And he remembered how often he said, "Not now, later. I'm busy. I'm working for your future." But now, the future had arrived, and it was empty. There were days when he picked up the phone to call his children, but hesitated. What if they didn't answer? What if they were too busy, just as he once was? Sometimes they did answer, with polite voices, with excuses wrapped in soft words. "Sorry, Dad. I have a meeting. I'll call later. We'll visit soon." But later never came. Soon became never. And each time his heart cracked a little more, until it felt like dust. At night, he lay in a king-sized bed, large enough for 4 people, but empty enough to feel like a desert. The sheets were cold. The silence was merciless. Sometimes he cried, but the walls swallowed his sobs without mercy. Other times he spoke aloud, imagining conversations that would never happen. "I miss you. Do you still think of me? Was it worth it?" He begged the air for answers, but only the shadows responded. As his illness grew worse, the staff who had once adored him now saw him as just another duty. Nurses came and went. Doctors visited, prescribed, and left. But none of them looked at him with love. None of them called him Dad. None of them cared if his stories went unheard, if his eyes filled with tears at night. They were there for the paycheck, not for him. And the irony cut like glass. He had spent his whole life paying for love with money, and in the end, all he had left were people who stayed only because of it. The day came when he realized his end was near. The disease had advanced too far. His body was giving up. He asked his assistant, one final time, to call his children. He begged. "Tell them I don't have much time left. Tell them I just want to see them. One last time. Please." Days passed. None came. He waited by the door. He waited by the phone. He waited until waiting became another form of dying. On his last night, rain lashed against the windows of his empty mansion. Lightning illuminated the halls, casting shadows that seemed to mock him. He lay in his bed, struggling to breathe, whispering to no one. "I gave you everything. Why couldn't you just give me a hug?" His final tears fell onto silk sheets that had never felt colder. Surrounded by wealth that could not save him, his last breath was not of pride, not of success, but of regret. And in that silence, the world learned a brutal truth. You can have everything, yet die with nothing. The news of his death spread quickly. Newspapers and television channels rushed to write headlines about the millionaire who had passed away in his mansion. They listed his achievements, his fortune, the companies he had built, the empires he had led. They wrote about the luxury, about the travels, about the glamorous photographs that had once decorated magazines. But none of them spoke about his heart. None of them mentioned that he died whispering for a hug that never came. None of them said that behind the marble and the gold, he left this world in unbearable loneliness. People read the articles, shook their heads, and went back to their lives. To them, he was just another rich man whose story ended like many others, grand in public, tragic in private. Some envied him, some pitied him, but few really understood the weight of his final days. Because the truth is, no amount of money could buy him the only thing he needed: love. In the mansion, silence reigned even after he was gone. The walls stood tall, but emptiness lived within them. The grand dining hall, with its chandelier with millions, had not hosted a family dinner in decades. The garden, once filled with laughter and games, was just grass and shadows. The pool reflected nothing but the moon. His empire had survived him, but his legacy, the true legacy of human connection, had vanished. When the lawyers gathered to read the will, his children finally appeared. They came in expensive suits, wearing designer watches, driving cars worth fortunes. They arrived not because of love, but because of inheritance. Their faces showed no tears, no sorrow. They were cold, distant, as if attending a business meeting rather than the farewell of the man who gave them life. The will was long, detailed, meticulously prepared. He had divided everything among them: the properties, the accounts, the shares. Each child inherited wealth beyond imagination. But at the end of the will, there was a letter, sealed, with his handwriting trembling across the envelope. It was addressed not to the lawyers, not to the companies, but to his children directly. The lawyer read aloud his final words. His voice cracked as the man's soul poured out from the page. "My dear children, I gave you everything I thought you needed. I built you a life without limits, a path without obstacles. But in doing so, I stole from you the one thing that mattered most. Me. I thought money could buy time, that success could replace presence. I was wrong, and now, at the end, I see the truth. You did not need the cars, the mansions, or the diamonds. You needed a father. And I wasn't there. I'm sorry. I hope that one day you will learn what I never did. That love cannot be replaced. Not by any fortune in this world." The room was silent. For the first time in years, his children lowered their heads. Some clenched their fists. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But none of them cried. Perhaps the years had dried their tears, or perhaps they simply could not feel what had been lost. because they never truly had it. Outside the mansion, the press waited. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved forward, and reporters asked, "What are your thoughts? What will you do with the inheritance? How do you feel about your father's passing?" The children gave rehearsed answers, vague and shallow, but deep inside, each of them felt something gnawing at their hearts, something they could not admit. Emptiness, because no matter how much money they now possessed, no matter how many assets they controlled, they could not buy back time. They could not go back to those childhood days when they begged their father to play with them, when they wanted him at their school events, when they longed for his presence at bedtime. Those moments were gone, and money could not resurrect them. In the days that followed, the mansion became a battlefield. Lawyers, accountants, and advisors came and went, dissecting the empire piece by piece. The children argued over assets, fought over details, and clashed over power. They became enemies over the wealth their father had left. The house, once a monument to his ambition, turned into a symbol of division. The more they gained, the emptier they felt. And somewhere, in the unseen silence of eternity, if his soul could still watch, perhaps he would have shed another tear knot for his fortune, but for the family that could never learn what he had failed to teach. But life has a cruel way of repeating lessons until they are learned. And soon, one of his children, the youngest daughter, found herself staring at her father's empty room one night. The bed was still there, untouched since the day he died. The sheets smelled faintly of his cologne. The lamp on the nightstand was still turned off, as if waiting for him to come back and switch it on. She stood there for a long time, and for the first time, she felt it. Not the weight of the money, not the weight of the inheritance, but the weight of regret. She whispered into the darkness, "Why didn't I go? Why didn't I hug you one last time?" Tears, real tears, ran down her face, and it was then that she understood. The emptiness she felt could not be filled with money. The silence she carried could not be drowned in noise. The regret would never leave her, because she had missed the only chance that mattered. She collapsed on the floor, clutching her chest, realizing that she had inherited not just wealth, but a wound that no one could heal. The irony of it all is that while the world saw their father as powerful and untouchable, he had died with the same fragility as anyone else. He had died with the same longing that every human being carries. The need to be loved, the need to be held, the need to not be alone. And so, the story of the millionaire who gave everything but received nothing became more than just a headline. It became a warning, a mirror for all those who chase wealth while ignoring love. A reminder that time is the only currency that truly matters, and that every hug withheld, every later postponed, every tomorrow promised but never delivered, will one day become the regrets we cannot escape. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the silence of the mansion never changed. It stood as a monument to what he had built, and as a grave to what he had lost. The children who had inherited his empire continued their lives, but the truth lingered inside each of them like a ghost. They had wealth, yes, more than most people could ever dream of. But every night, when the lights went off and the noise faded, they faced the same haunting realization. Their father had died begging for a hug, and none of them had been there to give it. The youngest daughter, the one who had cried in his room, began to change. She started painting, not because she was an artist, but because she wanted to express the ache in her soul. She painted empty chairs, silent hallways, cold beds. She painted the loneliness she could not describe in words. And when she shared those paintings online, people from around the world wrote to her, saying they too knew what it was like to grow up with absent parents, or to lose someone they loved without saying goodbye. Her grief became a bridge, her pain became art, and her father's absence, ironically, started giving presents to others. But she wasn't the only one who felt the weight of the letter he had left. The eldest son, once cold and hardened by business, found himself rereading his father's final words late at night. "You needed a father, and I wasn't there." This sentence burned in his chest. He remembered scoring his first goal on the soccer field, turning to look for his father in the stands and finding only empty seats. For years, he had buried those memories under money, alcohol, and pride, but now they resurfaced, raw and unrelenting, and he realized something terrible. He had become exactly like his father, obsessed with money, addicted to work, emotionally absent from his own children's lives. He saw the same pattern repeating, the same story writing itself again, and he knew he had to stop it. So one day, without warning, he closed his laptop during a board meeting, stood up, and walked out. His colleagues were shocked, but he didn't care. For the first time, he drove not to his office, not to his penthouse, but to his children's school. He arrived unannounced, just as they were finishing class. His daughter spotted him and froze, unsure if it was really him. Then he bent down, arms open wide, and whispered, "I'm sorry I missed so much, but I'm here now. Can I hug you?" Her tears were the answer. And as he held her, something broke inside him, the chains of his own childhood pain, the walls of ice he had built around his heart. He hugged her as if making up for every hug his father had missed, every moment lost to ambition, every smile swallowed by pride. In that instant, he understood wealth had given him everything but this. And this hug was worth more than all the empires in the world. The transformation was not immediate, nor was it easy. The siblings argued, tastum bled. They failed many times, but slowly, each of them began to wake up. They started spending weekends together, inviting their children, telling stories about the man they once resented but could not forget. At first, the memories were bitter, but then, unexpectedly, they found laughter, too. They remembered small details. The way he drank his coffee, the way he tapped his fingers when he was thinking, the rare but precious moments when he did smile. They began to see him not as the millionaire, not as the distant figure who had failed them, but as a flawed human being who never learned what truly mattered until it was too late. And that was the paradox. Through his death, he gave them the lesson he never mastered in life. Word of his stories spread beyond the mansion. The daughter's paintings were displayed in galleries, each one carrying the silent scream of her father's loneliness. The son gave speeches about balancing ambition with presence, standing in front of audiences who wept. As he confessed, "Don't wait until it's too late to hug the people you love." Their story became more than personal. It became a warning to the world. Because how many people chase wealth thinking it will bring happiness? How many parents believe providing money is the same as providing love? How many of us postpone hugs? Postpone time, postpone "I love you" until tomorrow only, to realize that tomorrow never comes. The story of the millionaire who died begging for a hug became a mirror that millions of people looked into. Some were shaken, some were broken, but many changed. Fathers picked up the phone to call their children. Children visited their parents after years of silence. Families reunited, realizing that no inheritance, no fortune, no empire could ever replace the warmth of arms wrapped around you. And that, perhaps, was his true legacy. Not the billions, not the companies, not the mansion. His legacy was the wound that taught others how not to repeat his mistakes. His legacy was the cry of regret that turned into a call for love. One night, months after his passing, the family gathered in the garden of the mansion. They lit candles, not for wealth, not for ceremony, but for memory. The grandchildren ran across the grass, laughing, filling the silence with the noise their father had once longed for. The siblings sat together, united for the first time in years, holding hands under the stars. And in that moment, they felt it, as if, somewhere in the unseen, he was there too, watching, listening, finally surrounded by the love he had always missed. They could almost hear his voice whisper, "Thank you. This is all I ever wanted." The mansion, once a prison of silence, became alive again, not with gold or marble, but with laughter and presence. And though the millionaire had died alone, his story did not end in loneliness. It ended with a warning, with a transformation, with a light that would shine for generations. So, to whoever listens to this story today, remember this. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose houses and build new ones, but you cannot lose time and ever get it back. Hug today. Love today. Be present today. Because tomorrow, it might be too late. And when the day comes that you take your final breath, may you not die surrounded by objects that cannot embrace you, but by people whose love carries you into eternity.